20 to 30 downloads a day became 200 to 300 downloads per day. And then the following year, it became, 500, 600, 700 downloads a day. And then in 2019, we got up to about 1,000 downloads a day.
All right. Welcome to Willing to Fail. I'm your host, Peyton Bennett, and today we have a very special guest. He is the CEO and founder of MySwimPro, which is essentially a personal training app for swimming. It was actually named the 2016 App of the Year by Apple for Apple Watches. He's also been featured in the Forbes 30 Under 30, and he's even done a TED Talk. Ksebati, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining. So, I have a lot of questions about the app and your journey there, but I'm more curious about you as the entrepreneur. So let's just start at the beginning. I saw you grew up in Michigan from some immigrant parents from, I forget where, I'll let you tell me, but I saw that they didn't even know how to swim, and now you have a full swimming company. So just tell me a little bit about your upbringing and how your environment or who in your family helped mold you to who you are.
Yeah, for sure. And again, thanks for having me on. I think this is a really interesting story that might be relatable, maybe if not swimming, but in some other dimension. So yeah, my parents came to the United States from Syria, and the community that they moved to, everyone swims, but they didn't do that. They came from a city. And I think that's relatable to a lot of people. If you're in the city, maybe you didn't have access to a pool or something like that. And so the environment that we're in, being in a close to waterfront community, everyone learns how to swim. So they did what any other parent would do is, I guess everyone signs their kids up for swim lessons. I guess we'll do that too. And sure enough, I did swim lessons at age 4 or 5, learned how to swim. And then I did the next step, which is the summer swim team, where, you go every single day at 8 in the morning. I actually didn't want to do that. It's kind of funny. I didn't want to be on swim team because you had to wake up early in the summer, which is when you don't have to wake up early for school. So it's what are we doing? I don't want to go swimming at 8 in the morning. What are you talking about? So we go swimming. I do the swim team. My older brother was on the swim team. My younger sister ended up doing that as well. And I just fell in love with it. And I actually wasn't very good. So when I started, it was just something that I loved doing. What's better than in the summer jumping in a pool? It's refreshing. It's beautiful, besides the 8 a.m. factor of it. And so if you fast forward a little bit, I ended up getting a little bit better at it. And I think anything that you love, you'll get better at just because you like it. And I swam in high school, at university, and then eventually started a company based off of that same industry. So that's kind of the fast forward of 20 years in 30 seconds.
Okay. Yeah, we'll slow it down a little bit. So was there anybody in your family or friends or siblings that you think helped mold you into the driven entrepreneur you are? Or do you think that was just genetics, or what do you think made you like that?
I think there's a healthy balance between just my parents, not from the swimming aspect, but on the entrepreneurship side. So my dad is a PhD research scientist, so very analytical, or I just kind of imagine what that means. And then my mom is an artist. Okay. So if you think about being in that household, you have the artistic side. My mom's very creative, very outgoing, wants to just build things, create things, show that artistic flavor. And I definitely have a lot of that. But at the same time, my dad's more analytic and kind of reserved and kind of very methodical and trying to think about things. So I think to be an entrepreneur, you need to have a little bit of both. And I think for me, I have a very good balance of that. It wasn't anyone's built empires in our family. It's more so, I think, that good mix of analytical perspective, artistic flavor, creativity, and trying to leverage both of those personality traits into what I do every single day. And I think those are a great setup for building something.
Makes sense. And I see that a lot of times common amongst successful entrepreneurs is it's very common to either be an immigrant or the first generation after immigrants, like your parents are immigrants. Did they have an extreme work ethic that you think you got from them, or was it more just the artistic and science side, like you said?
Yeah, I think that's definitely, it wouldn't be fair to not mention that. When you come to a new location with pretty much nothing and you have to build yourself up, I think there's definitely hard work that goes into that. And I think this is true. It doesn't matter where you're from. If you've come to a new location, new city, new country, new language, new culture, it's difficult and nothing's really handed to you. You have to work your way up just like anyone else who's in that same circumstance. And so I think, my story is probably similar to a lot of people in the sense that, maybe you didn't have everything just handed to you. You have to work for it. And I think those are definitely skills that have been instilled in me from a young age.
For sure. Makes sense. So let's get going. So it seems like also a lot of entrepreneurs, they've done some type of business ventures or something at a young age. I saw you did some like film work when you were 13 and maybe some other ventures in school. So tell me about those and what that experience was like.
Yes, I have been very entrepreneurial from a young age, and I didn't realize it until more recently when I actually thought about some of these experiences. Like my first paid job, and I think everyone's done some kind of volunteering or they're forced to do something. Maybe they don't want to and they don't get paid or whatever. But my first actual like paid gig, and it's so interesting to look back at this. So when I was 13, I was volunteering as a photographer at an art gallery. Right? My mom's an artist, so one of the artists, he was doing this big unveiling, and he hired me to be a videographer for this event. And it was downtown Detroit. So I had my mom drive me to the gig, to the video shoot gig, and so have like the equipment. And the guy didn't even realize how young I was. I was pretty small, so you'd think like I was like 12, but I'm like 13 years old. I'm tiny. I have to be driven to the gig. I do it. I get paid. It was like a couple $100, which at the time seemed like an astronomical amount of money to be giving me to do. It was actually good work. I mean, it's not like I did something with a snap of my fingers. I put in a good amount of time, made a couple $100, and I look back at that. I'm like, wow, I was like a freelance videographer at age 13. And this was, mind you, the timeline of this isn't like doing a videography job now where you pop out your iPhone or Android phone and you can film in 4K. Like I had like a real camera and a real tripod, like real equipment. And this was back in the day of like DVDs was new. So, put this program together, and it kind of just snowballed from there. Not in the sense of videography, but just doing random jobs like that I got a little bit of money here and there. And I was able to learn from those experiences and work with old people, in my mind, basically people who are adults. And I think I formulated those experiences in a lot of different ways beyond just doing like a video job when I was 13.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say like video freelancer, because like that's like the hip term now, like freelancing all this stuff. But you at the time didn't know that stuff. You were just like, all right, I need to do this. I want to do this to make money. So it's like the true entrepreneurship behind it, which is cool. And then I also saw that you did like in school or something, you were doing like some essay competitions and you ended up winning to get some equipment. What other kind of stuff did you do to as an entrepreneur throughout like middle school or high school?
Yeah, so this is I don't know if this is very it probably is entrepreneurial. I wrote an essay in an essay competition, and I won $20,000 worth of technology. And this was like from Panasonic. This was like a program. Yeah, you want to talk about astronomical amount of money for a teenager. So I'm like 15 when I write this, and the whole idea is this was back in the day when high definition was like new, and everything's going HD TVs, HD cameras. Now it's, everything's HD. But at the time, it was like, how can you use this technology how can you use it together? And I wrote an essay on how you can use all of these different, if you had a HD camera, HD TV, printer, laptop, if you had all this stuff, how would you use it? And so I wrote about how I would use it with my family and all the things that we would do and how great it was. And so I did this year-long program with Panasonic with $20,000 worth of stuff, and you get to keep all the stuff. So you get all this stuff, TV and everything, and then you do like product feedback. So I'm like 16, 17 years old in high school, and I'm doing like feedback for Panasonic, which now in retrospect sounds ridiculous. And I think that's, again, that's very entrepreneurial because I'm doing like big boy job type of thing as a teenager and, working in technology sort of at a kind of a high level. I mean, no one else in 10th grade is doing stuff like this. So I think that was pretty interesting, fun experience.
Yeah, that makes sense because like just looking at your YouTube channel, like your video quality from the drone shots and just the editing and all that stuff, it's like, okay, this isn't his first time doing this. He's been messing with videos for a little while.
Right on. Appreciate it.
Okay, so then let's get past high school. Then you go to college where, of course, like the hardworking person you are, you're a walk-on onto the swim team. And then you guys end up having a pretty good swim team. Was that just like, is that passion for swimming still there? And does it grow more? And when does the idea for MySwimPro come around?
Yeah, I was a total swimming nerd. In some ways, I was a bigger swimming nerd then because I was so in with the numbers and I'm competing all the time. And to clarify for anyone who's listening who doesn't understand what swim nerd means. So think of, in basketball, baseball, all these other sports, there's all these statistics about all these athletes and their batting average, like all these, there's so many numbers that you can throw in a sport per athlete. And the swimming equivalent top times by event, what they can like in different parts of the year, how fast they are, what you can expect from different athletes at different times of the season. Like I knew that for all the athletes. Like I knew, for my friends on the swim team, I knew their best times better than they knew their own best times. like their 50 free time, all of these things. So because I was a swimming nerd, I was just so into it. And I wasn't like the best swimmer. So I was a walk-on at university. I mean, sure, I was like captain in my senior season, but it wasn't because I'm like scoring all the points at NCAAs. It's I think it's partly, just my interest in the sport and leadership and all that stuff. So, you take all that experience of being a swim nerd. And then I actually worked for a swimming related company as an intern during this 2 of the summers between my junior and senior year, and then even after college. And so I got into the swimming entrepreneurship scene through that company, but it wasn't until about a year and a half later that I actually started MySwimPro. And really the inception for starting this company came from my experience through swimming as an adult outside of the swimming bubble. And I think anyone who's deep into sports, you can kind of feel what this is like. So when you're deep into the sports world, whatever sport you're in, you're kind of in a bubble. Like you can only communicate at a high level with a certain kind of person who's also a nerd of that category. And so that's the bubble I was in. And as soon as I left college and I got into the real world and I saw what swimming looked like from the outside perspective, that is how I had the ability to see what swimming is really like and where the opportunities and challenges are. And that is how I started the company. And I don't think I would have been able to have the insight that I have now and when I started the company while I was inside the bubble. It's very difficult to see what's going on when you're in a bubble. That's the definition of a bubble. And so I think it took about a year or two to really understand how the market actually works outside of the bubble.
Yeah, it's interesting. For your app, what it is, it's for those listening that don't know, it's the way I see it from the outside the bubble. It seems like a personal training app for swimming. So I know you've talked about this before, but what was the hole that you saw in the market, or what was the problem you were trying to solve when creating that idea?
Yeah, totally. And this is something that people inside the bubble can't see. And really the challenge is when you swim on a team and you do any kind of a team sport growing up, you're used to having a coach tell you what to do, right? Like it doesn't matter what sport you play, soccer, football, like it's very difficult. You can put together a game of football and you can go play with the boys or girls, whatever. But when you're on a team, the coach is kind of leading everything. And in swimming, it's the same thing. If anything, in swimming, it's more difficult because you think you just swim back and forth, like kind of gets old pretty fast. So the coach sets the direction and there's competitions and everything. And when you leave that and you still want to swim, you don't have a coach. So there's a huge problem because now you want to swim. It's a great exercise. It's good for you. Whether you want to compete or not, it's a great physical activity, but you don't know what to do. You're so dependent on a team, the coach, teammates, that whole environment. And that's completely gone when you leave high school or college or whatever level that you swam until. So for me, from the outside world, I saw this and I'm like, holy crap. Like so many people want to swim and they have no idea what they're doing. And they're always asking me for help. They're like, Ferris, can you write a workout? I need a training plan. Should I do this? Should I do this? And if you go online and you try and Google, you go to Google. If you don't know the answer to something, go to Google, you go to YouTube. And there's just kind of like a lot of noise. There's not really anything that's very good. That's like, this is what you do. Step 1, step 2, step 3. And from a mobile tech perspective, there definitely wasn't anything. There's no mobile app. There were mobile apps for weightlifting, yoga, meditation, running, biking, pretty much everything you could think of, but swimming. And so the inception for MySwimPro was how can we bridge that gap of what people were used to having as a coach? We can put that in a mobile application. So you have a coach kind of on demand that's giving you a personalized workout so that you can get faster, healthier, whatever your goal is, and we can help you get there.
Yeah, it's a really good idea. I mean, you're definitely spot on saying that like any other of these sports like boxing, any of these other sports you want to do like lifelong, like yoga or personal training or whatever, there's plenty of places to go. But yeah, for me is the same type of person that's like wasn't in the bubble, did swim team when I was little, hated it. But glad I did it to learn how to swim. But right. I learned of how good of an exercise swimming was, so I tried to get myself to do it once a week. But yeah, there was definitely no structure to anything to it. It's like, all right, I'm going to swim back and forth until I feel like I'm going to drown, and then I'm going to go home.
Right.
So you have a good idea, but every entrepreneur knows that's only half of it. It's about the execution. So you get the idea, and then what's the first step you take to get that process going?
Yeah, totally. And I like what you said about execution versus the idea. If anything, in verbal sense, it's half. So it's half the idea, half execution. In
More
actual
execution.
practicality, it's like 1% is the idea, because once you have the idea, I mean, everyone's got great ideas, right? It doesn't matter your background or whatever. We all have great ideas. So step one for me was, okay, let me validate this idea, because let me make sure I'm not a crazy person. And I think, so I do my primary research. I go to Google, I go to YouTube, I search like what's out there. Why are people asking me for questions? It kind of gets repetitive. Like, why can't I just send them an article or another app that they can solve this problem with? And I didn't find that. Then I moved on to secondary research. Okay, so let me just talk to other swimmers, people I know, people I don't know. And it became clear that I was onto something, because no one really had a good answer. That's why people were asking me in the first place, because there wasn't really a great answer. So once I got past this initial, like by myself, customer discovery, then I'm like, all right, I need to take action. So I need to actually like put together a plan to build something to solve this problem. So the first thing that I did after I did the research was I put together like a mock-up of, okay, so what is the problem? People have this certain problem. What would the app look like? Like, what would be the value of actually having this? So I put together some designs in Photoshop, self-taught on a lot of these things, put together some designs. And then I did what any logical person does when they have an idea for a company. You go and buy the URL. So I bought the URL, MySwimPal.com. Now the company's named MySwimPro. It kind of pivoted the name, but initially it was MySwimPal.com. Bought that for 10 or 12 bucks, whatever it was. And then I put my designs on this page, and you could download this app even though it didn't exist yet. So I had the email capture, download this app, and I used Twitter. I think today the equivalent would be Instagram of how I did this, but I would just DM people. I would engage with the relevant hashtags of swimming, and I would just send a couple hundred people to this URL to download this app that didn't exist. Not necessarily because I wanted to like trick them and be like, haha, there's no app, but it was more so to validate that, oh shoot, like a certain number of people and a certain kind of person really wants this. And then since I have their email, let me get them on the phone and ask them, why did you want to download this? And further clarify what exactly they're looking for. And it turns out I had some assumptions that were right and some that were not as on point with the website that I created. So after about a month or two of doing this, I'm like, okay, I'm ready. I have enough information. I'm ready to go from this design that I created myself. I have, a couple hundred people put in their email to download an app that doesn't exist yet. Now I can build something because I have very good conviction that this is actually it. So the next step of this story, I actually went to a hackathon event, and I actually started networking. And so at one of these events called Detroit Startup Weekend, I met one of my co-founders, and together in that weekend, we built the first version of the app on Android. And then from there, just a few weeks later, I recruited another team member who is now our co-founder to work on the iOS version. And so, in just a matter of like weeks and months, we went from this idea in my head to, a prototype that's actually live on the App Store on Google Play for Android, and then an iOS app that was in development. So that was all at the end of 2014, beginning of 2015. Everyone was working on it part-time. And then eventually I went full-time, and the rest is kind of history, building from there. But that's kind of the initial. It wasn't just like idea, hired someone, app. There was a lot of, research, talking to people, putting designs out there that I created myself, getting feedback on that, and then eventually recruiting team members.
Yeah, that's definitely a smart way to do it. I mean, the click tunnel thing, that's like pretty common. I've actually done a little bit of that stuff myself. But what's impressed me was that you actually took the time to call those people and actually get like actual feedback from a human being.
Yeah.
So I bet that made a big difference. So then I'm guessing the guys you met that became your co-founders, I guess they were more of like the software engineer side that was kind of filling the gap of what you weren't best at.
Yeah, totally. So you want to have complementary skills with a similar passion. So, both of them are software engineers. One of them I met through a swimming connection, swam at a different university than I did. And so like through the swimming world, I was able to find the right people. I talked to a lot of people. I still am always recruiting, trying to figure out who's the best people to join the team. It's really funny you mentioned, though, that I actually talked to someone on the phone. I just had a crazy flashback because I was sitting right there, 5 feet from where I am right now, when I had one of these calls, and I had like one of these light bulb moments because a lot of people didn't reply. And that's the part that I think kills a lot of entrepreneurs. So I had this email list of 200 people. I emailed them first. I mean, that's how you get their phone number. And a lot of them didn't reply. I got very few replies. I think that's sometimes people get discouraged when they get no or ignored or rejected, and that kills them. And then so I ended up getting someone on the phone, and I remember talking to them, and it was so reinvigorating, revalidating to hear what they were describing. And it lined up so perfectly with what I was thinking. and everything. And that was good fuel for the fire. And I think, not to say like, if I didn't have that call, none of this would have happened, but it was definitely a motivator. And I think there's like certain inflection points like that you'll have in the journey that kind of amplify what you're already working towards. And if you don't have those, it's gonna move slower. But if you don't do anything, you're never gonna have these inflection points. So that was interesting, thinking that I was sitting right there when I had that call.
That's cool. You had that flashback, but yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. You're right. A lot of people would be timid to that, because that fear of rejection probably stops people from making that. But yeah, if you send out 200 emails and only one person answers, but you get that something from that one person, then it's all worth it. So now at this point, from what you've told of the story so far, you've met your co-founders, you've got this app developed, everyone was working part-time. I don't know the deals you made with them at that point, whether it was you were paying them to design the app or if they were just like part ownership. I don't know how you did that, but I know for having an app and just keeping an app running, there's a lot of costs that go along with that. So what are some ways that you funded the business once you needed to get money in, and how much of it do you still own?
Yeah, great question. So, and this, I get asked this so often, like I had this idea for an app. How do you build it? How much does it cost? All these things. So the biggest expense actually, when it comes to development, if you're building it yourself or you have your own team, you're not, hiring a company to do it, it's time. That's the biggest expense. Time is our greatest asset. So for these two guys who are software engineers, who are my co-founders, really my vision from day one, I'm building a company and not I'm building an app that I need to hire someone. And that's a different mindset in approaching how you do this. I actually made a YouTube video that I go into detail about different ways you would go about this, because if your mindset is, I have an idea for an app, I want to hire someone to build it, the way you go about it, the cost structure, all that is very different from kind of how I did it, where I am building a technology company and we're in this for the long run. And this is the timeline and strategy of how we're going to build it out. Therefore, it was a full equity. There was no money in the very beginning. Now, that's not to say we haven't raised money. We'll move into that in just a sec. But in the very beginning, it was 100% equity, not equity in the sense that like you're a part owner, you're a co-founder, right? That's what it means. That's the difference between hiring someone and bringing someone on as a team member with the strategy and the milestones of, once we do this, we're going to make money doing this, we're going to raise money doing this, and that's how we're going to be able to pay ourselves and kind of build the snowball. So in terms of financing, I mean, we've raised about $1 million so far in outside funding, everything from we did an accelerator program, equity crowdfunding, venture capital, grants. I've won over $100,000 in pitch competition money. Nice. So all of that together is about $1 million. In terms of ownership, I still own about half the company, just myself. And my two co-founders own a good chunk of the rest. We have all of our team members get option grants and equity when they join the team as part of the compensation. Now we're in a position where everyone gets paid like real money in addition to the equity. But in the beginning, it was the opposite. It was no cash and all equity. And then we started to kind of flip the equation more to where, because at the end of the day, like you can't work for free forever, right? It doesn't work like that. You got lives, you got, whatever, families. So now as we're a real company, we actually pay a salary in addition to the equity. But I think the fundraising didn't come in until about 2 years in. So we didn't raise any money from the outside. I'm sorry, a year and a half. So first year and a half, zero outside money, zero revenue, working for sweat equity in the very beginning.
Yeah, that's impressive. I mean, I'm sure for you, it's probably not as hard to stay motivated in those times, but what are some things you did to keep those guys that you like sold them on the dream? You're like, no, the money will come. Just trust me. Or were they like fully on board, like saw the vision like you did?
Yeah, I think that's the skill of the entrepreneur. You have to be able to effectively communicate the vision and how you're going to get there. There's a lot of people who do dream big, and I give them full credit. Like, we're going to, like the best version of this is Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos. One of these people that's like, we are going to Mars. Like literally that. I mean, just think about that for a second. We are going to build, this company is going to send people to another planet. Like, whatever you're working on is not as ambitious as that. Like, just flat out. Like, you're not trying. I mean, that's ridiculous. So okay, that's great. You have an idea, you have a vision. The execution and the strategy is really, really important, because without that, the idea is like, yeah, we'll go to Pluto, whatever. So for me, I think that's what I've noticed. Really successful entrepreneurs, they're able to have that insane vision, but they're able to communicate the strategy of how you're going to get there. And I think when it comes to like salary and all that stuff, it's a lot easier to follow the crazy person if there's a clear strategy. And as you move through those milestones, you're actually reaching them. So okay, there's 10 steps to get to Mars. So far, he said, 1, 2, and 3, and we've hit 1, 2, and 3, and I can see the road or the airspace to Mars. Like, you can see the path. And if you just have this big idea of we're going to Mars and there's no 1, 2, 3, well, that's how you lose interest and that's how you lose motivation.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Just kind of the analogy is like, you don't set out to build a brick wall. You just lay one brick as perfectly as you can on the other brick and just keep going.
Totally.
So for you guys, like you said, you hit a bunch of milestones, and I'm sure one of them being like app of the year was probably pretty cool. What were some of those milestones that you think helped like launch because for the app, I mean, you can have a great idea and a great app, but getting it out there has got to be, I would imagine, one of the toughest parts. So what are some things that you did to get it out there, and what were some of those milestones like that you hit?
Yeah, totally. So milestone, it's really interesting you mentioned app of the year. So in retrospect, it's easy to point to that as being a epiphany, tipping point, whatever you want to call it. But it's not a milestone before that happens because you don't really have control over that. So I think it's really important to note our milestones are things, and they should be, that you have full control over. So, launching the app, at that point is like a milestone. Android, iOS. Launching the subscription, the paid version, so you actually start to make money, that's a big milestone. Getting our first investment, our accelerator program, that's, getting some kind of cash flow besides the revenue of the business. That's another milestone. Passing 10,000 downloads, passing, 100 paying customers, 1,000 paying customers, hiring the first team member, raising a real round of capital rather than just, the initial investment. So these are all milestones. And now it's not really any different. It's just bigger versions of the same thing over and over.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's true to focus on definitely what you can control. So yeah, because I know now and you know the numbers better than me. It seems like you guys have over 1 million downloads on the apps. So, and then at the beginning, obviously you have 0. So was it a pretty exponential curve that was to get that? I mean, it wasn't just like a straight line to get there.
Yeah, it's definitely, it's not exponential. It's not a straight line. It's gradual. I think that's probably the best way to put it. So exponential, you think the hockey stick graph, everyone's seen that. That means you're going to Mars.
Yeah.
And, there are times where we saw that. For the most part, it was more of a parabolic, but a flat, like a wide sine curve almost, where it's not a hockey stick. It's not going to infinity. There's no asymptote. You're growing. So for example, to put some numbers on it. So in the first year, in 2015, we were getting about 20 to 30 downloads a day on average. So the first year, I believe we had 6,000 downloads. And that because we launched in the middle of the year. And I'm talking iOS. That's our biggest platform. So, second half of 2015, we get 6,000 downloads. The next year in 2017, and this is, after we've been featured, 2016, we passed 100,000 downloads. So how did we go from 6,000 to, that's multiple times more? It's a lot more, but it's still gradual on like a day-to-day basis. So, 20 to 30 downloads a day became 200 to 300 downloads per day. And then the following year, it became, 500, 600, 700 downloads a day. And then in 2019, we got up to about 1,000 downloads a day. So it wasn't like day one, 20 downloads, and then fast forward, we're at the top of the curve and we're hitting 1,000 downloads a day. Now this year, everything's kind of been thrown out the window just because of the pandemic and access to pools and stuff like that. So our search volume is a lot lower. It's about half actually right now of what it was in 2019. I'm pretty confident that once pools open and the world is somewhat back to normal, we're going to see, numbers like we did in 19 and actually higher than that. But until that time, it was growing pretty well. But I think this is important for people to understand, like you're going to have bumps in the road or, plateaus, craters. It's not perfect linear.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. Obviously, this year is a little different for everybody. But yeah, I mean, me personally, like I said, I used to go to the gym once a week and swim laps, and now I don't even have access to a pool, so I don't do that at all. So I know that's happened to a lot of you guys as customers. They don't have access to a pool or whatever. So what were some adjustments you guys made during these times to kind of like pivot?
Yeah, we did a pretty dramatic pivot in March of 2020, March, April, just because at that point, like no one knew what was going on. Like literally people think like the world is ending. And, it's very difficult to know the future. One thing you do know is that pools are closed. And if you don't have a pool, you can't go swimming. And if you're not going to go swimming, there's no reason to pay MySwimPro for your monthly or yearly subscription. And so that's the reality. And I was kind of like thinking ahead. I was actually on vacation in February while the world was kind of shutting down. I was in Kuwait. And like literally the world is shutting down while I was in another country, which is a crazy experience. And so I get back and I'm like, all right, we need to figure out what the heck is going to go on. And so it was a few weeks later, if you remember, in the United States, we were kind of behind a lot of other countries in what was going on in terms of stuff shutting down. So before the world shut down and the US shut down, we came up with a plan to create like a whole new feature set in the app specifically for at-home workouts for our existing community members. So it's very difficult to compete with like Peloton and all these other at-home workout apps. But if we can take the swimming perspective of training and do it at your house, swimming specific exercises that you can do, like I'm the main model in the videos, literally in my brother's living room, we filmed these. And so in like 2 weeks, we put together all this, hundreds of videos, new training programs. We built all this. And by April, we had launched a whole new model of the app. We changed our pricing model, our trial duration, we changed everything. And now 6 months later, we've had, 6 months of data to look at how the environment has responded to that. And now the next step is to continue to iterate on that because the pandemic's not over.
No,
we still got.
I still can't go to a pool.
Yeah, so it's diverse access. Depends on your city, your country, and we have a global community of people that use the app. So U.S. is actually not a fair snapshot of what's going on. We have a very diverse set of people, and so the next 18 months are going to be a lot more of just pivoting, refining, and figuring out how to make this work.
Gotcha. So yeah, So I was looking forward in the next 18 months or even further. What other ways do you think you guys will pivot, or where do you see it in like 5 or 10 years?
Yeah. So we've pivoted a lot already. So the next 18 months is going to be refining what we've been adjusting. And so I'm actually very excited because if we can look beyond the next 18 months, and I'm thinking the beginning of 2022, like the whole year of 2022, 2023, by that point, the world will have returned to whatever the new normal looks like. And, pools for the most part should be open by then. And so we'll have the 2 years before that to refine the strategy, improve the product offering. So that way we're ready for what that new environment looks like. Whereas right now I would say we're kind of scattered. And 6 months ago, we were very scattered. And so we have the next 18 months to refine that. So that way we have a launching pad to really grow and excel in like 2022 and beyond. So beyond, 10 years is really hard to judge because who knows if people are going to be carrying around iPhones and Androids at that point. But in the next 5 years, for sure, it'll be a refined version of what we're doing now and a launch pad so that by 2022, 2023, we can really explode.
Gotcha. Is there any, I know you're kind of dependent on what other technologies are, but is there any ideas floating around that you would, if technology catches up, you would like to do? Like, for example, if there's good underwater headphones that you could go along with the training or anything like that?
Yeah, totally. And what's interesting, when I started the company, the Apple Watch didn't exist. And then we were App of the Year, and 2/3 of our paying customers are on Apple Watch. So I think that goes to say, in technology, stuff can move pretty fast. And if you can time, you can't control the timing of the market. Like you can't control how VR is going to be adopted or how voice is going to become the thing. You can try your best to understand when, but you might be off by 3 years or certain industries might not pick up at all what you think will happen. So for us, swimming, technology, in the next 3 years, the smartphone is not going anywhere. Smartwatches also not really going anywhere, like Apple Watch, Garmin, all these smartwatches. So I think for the next 3 years, you'd be very comfortable to assume you're still going to be dependent on your phone. Now, if we look beyond that, say 3 to 7 years out, depending on what some of the big players come out with, say Apple or others, when it comes to glasses or goggle technology and what you can do with that, that'll make things really, really interesting. And we would want to be positioned to help people get better at swimming, both in and out of the water, if there's technology that can go on your face. Right now, it's not even worth going too deep into it because you don't know what that looks like. Yeah. And that's 3 years from now. So at the minimum, in my opinion, at the minimum 3 years from now. So we'll see.
Yeah, it's definitely out of your hands. But yeah, I never even thought about that. That'd be cool to have some type of augmented reality, with your goggles, maybe to make swimming in a pool a little more fun than just going back and forth and staring at the ground.
Maybe you don't need to go to the pool. I don't know. Look at Peloton. You're going biking and you're not leaving your house. That could happen. I think Peloton, as an example, is pretty simple because it's a bike and stationary bikes have been around for decades. And then it's a big TV screen. Like, so swimming would be it need a little bit more than that, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I've seen those things in the backyard that are kind of like swimming treadmills that
right. Yep.
some people have, which
Totally.
is not really practical for everybody. But yeah, maybe there's some other technology. So
Yep.
since we can't predict that too far, I mean, I wish you the best of luck in that. But what you as a person fares first, I'm curious what other ventures you have. You're wearing a MyTriPro shirt. I imagine that has,
oh man,
I mean, it sounds pretty similar to MySwimPro. So I imagine you have something to do with that. And what is that?
this is I'm actually happy you brought it up the way you did. So yes, MyTriPro, and this is a fun story here. MyTriPro is another app that our company launched in 2019. Very similar to MySwimPro, but for triathlon. So instead of having a swim coach, you're getting a triathlon coach. Swim, bike, run, plan on a calendar. It's great. Now, at the time, pre-pandemic, this was like, okay, we're going to move into a new vertical. We've got a new app, very exciting, putting out content, making apparel, and like putting it out there. And then so we got some decent traction in year one, but 2020, this was going to be the full year of, because you start training for a triathlon months in advance.
Yeah.
So Rona comes in here and the pandemic just shuts everything down and there's zero triathlon races happening. So, this was, it is what it is. Like we're not controlling the world. So because of that, we've actually made some very strategic decisions that are very difficult. We're actually discontinuing the app of the shirt that I'm wearing right now, MyTriPro, and we will no longer we're sunsetting it. We're also cutting a few other wearable extensions for our main MySwimPro app. And these are difficult decisions because I'm not going to name the names of the wearable partners that we have, but these are massive companies and we're saying we're not going to support them. And it's like, well, why would you do that? These are huge companies. I'll say it, Fitbit, right? Fitbit's a big company. You've heard of it. And so we're not supporting that anymore. Like, how can you drop Fitbit? That's huge. Don't people wear that? Yes, but for our audience and the value prop, we cannot support all of these different product offerings effectively. And so we have to pick the ones that are the highest value to us as a business and the community. And right now, that's Apple Watch and Garmin. It's not MyTriPro, right? This is the worst year possible to launch some of these, types of things. So because of that, we're going to sunset it. For anyone watching this who's a member, your membership will be good for like a year, but we're going to sunset it and you can't download it in the App Store or anything like that. So thank you for asking that because, it's not all daisies and flowers. Like literally we're shutting down parts of the company because it just doesn't make any sense. We can't handle supporting it effectively. It's better for us to focus on what we're doing well and what we have the most control over.
Yeah, I mean, I'm dealing with the same things right now, trying to launch like different branches of WTF sports, and some are good, some are not good. So, I mean, yeah, there's definitely this misconception that like if you're successful, you're successful, or if you're a failure, you're a failure. It's like, no, most people just fail all the time, and then you're successful every once in a while, and those are the ones that take you where you want to go. So, kind of back to the triathlon thing. I know I saw that you're still like, or I guess pre-corona days, we're still trying to get into competitions with swimming or whatever. I saw you swim from like one country to another country. So are you just like a crazy person, or you love competition, or what drives you to do that?
Yeah, it wasn't a country to country. It was continent to continent.
Oh, okay. Jesus.
But so it's the same country. This is Istanbul, Turkey. We're talking about, so Istanbul, the Bosphorus divides the city into two parts. So one side is on Asia and one side is on Europe. So you swim, it's a race every year, annual, and 2,500 people swim from one side to the other. It's not like this battle where it's like, okay, we're gonna go swim. It's very organized. It's by the Turkish Olympic Committee. They have big boats. It's an amazing experience. Anyway, I don't think I'm actually one of those crazy people that's like, I'm gonna go climb Mount Everest or I'm gonna do the English Channel. Maybe I'll do one of those things, but I'm more practical of I want the experience and I want to be able to travel. So I've competed in the FINA Masters World Championships, and I did that because it was in Hungary, right? And I'd go to Budapest, travel Europe, do all that stuff. I'm not, trying to break world records. I certainly like to perform at a high level, but I'm not going to drastically change my life like some people do in order to achieve some of these milestones. For me, it's like bucket list items. It's fun to do if I can travel. It's also from a fitness level perspective, it makes it a lot easier to train and work out when you have a goal, right? It's very difficult to motivate yourself to just, work out every day if you're just trying to stay in shape. Like that's great to have physical health, but when okay, I'm swimming from Asia to Europe, I'd like to do well at that. I'd like to feel good the entire hour of swimming. And so it makes you more focused in your training. And then the result speaks for itself. So it's a fun experience overall.
Gotcha. So do you personally have anything else you're trying to train for or looking forward to when things open back up?
Yeah, so it's funny because I was actually going to go to Masters Nationals in April of this year, and that got canceled. And so I'll probably do an equivalent of that like every single year. So every year I'll have I'd like to do some kind of high level competition. So in 2019, it was Asia to Europe. In 2018, it was the Pan Am Masters in Florida. The year before, it was in Hungary. Year before that, it was Masters Nationals. So I don't know. It could be in the U.S. It could be abroad. Something that allows me to travel, and if I'm healthy and able to keep doing it, I'll just keep rocking and rolling.
That's awesome. Well, I'm sure whatever you decide to do, you'll do well like you have in the past. So I appreciate you coming on. I don't have any more questions, but give you a last chance, Ferris, to say if you last anything about the app, where they can find it or where they can find you on social media or what else you got going on.
Yeah, totally. I mean, if you guys are swimmers or you made it this far, you're intrigued, you check out the MySwimPro app available on iOS and Android in the App Store. And if you're interested in following my journey or entrepreneurship related stuff from my perspective, I pump out vlogs on my YouTube channel talking about building startups, investing in startups, and kind of a behind the scenes of how I'm building this company. So check out my YouTube channel.
All righty. Well, I appreciate you coming on, Ferris. I'll talk to you later.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
And that's a show.